Good afternoon and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Bills 2023 Training Camp Day 1 recap. You are joining Greg Thompson here along with Eric Turner and Thomas DeLaus. Today was a really fun day out at St. John Fisher. We had, a little bit of cloud cover. I could use a couple
Yes.
more clouds.
Yes.
The fans were out. We got to see all the team out there just in helmets and jerseys, but able to get a couple takeaways here. Eric, what were some things that stood out to you?
I thought today's practice was very business-like, had a really good tempo to it. We have to remember, by the time we get to this point in camp and in the off season, these guys have run the schemes, techniques, assignments 2, 3, maybe 4 times. So it's a reset, right? It's a reset for those guys and the staff, and they're learning those new concepts and stuff. And that install happens again. But also, it's a reset for us, fans, right? Because there's a lot more toys, new toys on offense and defense, and we're starting to learn those numbers. So I thought it was a very good practice, and we're going to dive into some of the details about that.
Thomas, how about you?
You know, uh, the big thing about this was there was a lot of emotion. A lot of guys that are coming back for the first
Yeah.
time. Micah Hyde, second, since the second week last year, we really didn't get to see him. He was a pivotal piece of our team, having him back out there. DeMar Hamlin, since the situation in Cincinnati. Just a team that is trying to bounce back from a tough end of the season last year, coming through to potentially kind of silence all the narratives
Hmm.
that they heard from the offseason. I think you saw today a team that was more focused than I think you would normally see on the first practice of training camp. So a lot to look forward to, and should be very excited about the coming days.
Yeah, and I think that being in a position where we're out there for the first day, you're not sure exactly what you're going to see. Is it going to
Right.
be just a lot of walkthrough kind of stuff? The team takes their kind of security very seriously, and they don't want to let on for a lot of information out. So there's a lot of new names. We weren't
Right.
sure who was going to be in what spots, or
Yeah.
starting spots. I was actually pretty pleased with how much we were able to take away from today. There were some really interesting wrinkles schematically,
Hmm.
some players in different spots that we'll go through. But I was pleased with how much we were able to take away from today and being able to hang out. And before we go into some of those breakdowns, make sure you're checking out. We just rolled out our new phase of Cover One Pass. You guys can sign up as One Pass premium members. You get access. The best part for me is our Slack channel. You're
Yes.
able to be in there with the
100%.
community of fans. We're really proud of the community and how smart our fans are. We find out news in there sometimes faster
Yeah.
than
No
out
doubt.
on social media. You have guys racing to be able to share things together. Eric's dropping little nuggets that we hear from people around our sources, and getting all kinds of different things. We have a really cool new T-shirt design, decals,
Yes.
and a lot of different access to premium content we don't put out everywhere else. So
Correct.
you did a really nice glossary series, being able to share what some of the terms that you hear are. I did a salary cap one-on-one series, kind of walking people through some of the different pieces. So a lot of times people ask, how they can help support what we do. That's where that one pass goes. It gives us the access and all the logins and all the different subscriptions that we need to be able to put together some of the data and graphics and information, and our preparation for the shows
100%.
is from that support. So if anybody wants to know, check it out in the show description here. That's the best way to support us, be able to help out what we continue to build with some of what we think are the best fans in the world. So Eric, what were some of the initial things you actually took away as you started to dive into the details of what we saw today?
Yeah, like you said, it's hard, early on in camp, especially day one, no pads, not much contact to really kind of grab some context. But I did see some cool stuff that happened today. A lot of times, as I said, they're running foundational base concepts, whether it's on offense and defense. And sometimes, it's not just the identity that they're trying to build for that offense or defense, but also things that they want to work on, right? And something Josh Allen talked about is turning the ball over. And so on the offensive side of the ball, right from the gate, right at the start of practice, they worked on ball security drills, right? So you had the defenders on the defensive side of the ball going through drills, trying to rip the ball out. You saw wide receivers and tight ends doing the gauntlet drill. So obviously that was an area they wanted to improve on. And if you look at some of the stats from last year, we know about Josh Allen turning it over in the red zone. Unfortunately, he had a rough year when it came to that, when really last year was more of an outlier. I mean, the Bills were third in total giveaways on offense. They were second in fumbles last year. So it's a concerted effort, and we saw that. Again, yes, it's day one, but that context of starting off practice with ball security drills, it goes a long way when you're trying to analyze and, again, pull that context out of practice.
How about you, Thomas?
I think the one thing that I noticed with this practice is you definitely have a bunch of guys that came into today that they already know what their role is, and I think that's important for this team
Hmm.
because in previous years there was a lot of kind of jockeying for who was going to be the next best guy, and you kind of see some kind of solidified roles right out of the gate. One of the big things I saw was Tre'Davious White that came back this year, and He is a guy on a mission, truly. I think, what he went through last year was difficult for him trying to get over that hurdle, but you're seeing guys like him right out of the gate come through, and it's no longer fine tuning things. He is definitely taking that next step, and I think trying to get back to that all pro status.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those little intricacies that are going on. I think one big thing that I noticed today was Matthew Smiley being able to go into this with no punter, no kicker battles, and that's huge. He can install exactly how he wants to, or even just roll out with the exact same, philosophies he had last year. You saw some fun little battles, like you had Justin Shorter being a gunner. You had the new guy Deontay Hardy taking over as the punt returner, which was big for first team punt returning duties. So a lot of stuff going on in the first day, but a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and I thought one of the things that I was curious about was last year we saw some things where early on in the season we saw a lot of the pre-snap motion.
Yes.
And then we lost some of that the
Yeah.
rest of the year. And we didn't know, was that Dorsey going away from that? Was that because Josh with the UCL injury couldn't get some of the short middle game, and that helped there? But we missed it. Whatever it was, we needed it back.
Yeah.
We saw that back today.
No doubt.
Obviously, with the investment in the draft, we thought, are we going to see more 12 personnel? They open up immediately in 12 personnel with multiple tight end sets. Being able to focus on that, I really like seeing those pieces that we wanted to be part of the base install. The primary focus for the offense was already there in a big piece of what we had going on. And I know it was exciting to see right off the bat in the red zone as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And that 12 personnel, I think that's the crux of practice today. I think, again, setting that tone with the multiple tight ends, right, guys, whether it's in the open field or in the red zone. And you talked about that movement, and having two tight ends on the field with that 12 personnel look, it allowed them today, especially when you're talking movement, to put Shakir or put Hardy not in the slot, but as boundary guys, because now you have both of those double tight ends on the line of scrimmage. And a lot of times it was 2x2 sets, so a tight end and a wide receiver to each side. So you can use those smaller receivers that really may struggle if they're on the line of scrimmage versus press, right? Something we talk about a lot. So we got to see double tight formations, and they had Shakir, Hardy, not just in the slot, but moved around as boundary receivers. And it also opens up things for guys underneath. So you have those tight ends and those double tight end sets. You can run them off right down the seam. They're big targets. If they're open, you see cover 3 and the seam's open, you can throw it to them. But what we saw today was, hey, you can get those in-breaking routes, right? You can get those short in-breaking routes to those smaller receivers. The checkdowns, the Cook, we saw a 7 to 10 yard gain quite easily. So that's what's so fun about that personnel. It's also never been done really from the Bills in this regime, and there's not much film on it. So those new wrinkles on day one, it is like, okay, hello, this is going to be a base concept. It's going to be foundational for that offense.
And as we get into some of the players that stood out for us there, I think the tight ends are a great place to start. Early on, we saw 2 drops from Dawson Knox. He was a little frustrated with himself. He actually jumped ahead of a couple people back in line because he wanted to get another rep right then to get it. And I don't mind that. And I think Knox last year showed us he was over a little bit of that. But it was his first 2 reps, he dropped both. It was kind of in his head. And on the other side of it, all of us consistently were talking about Dalton Kincaid. You called it before practice started. Thomas and I were talking about it as we were watching. It just consistently stands out how much this guy flashes. So smooth, in and out of his breaks. The way he's able to move at his size, very, very exciting. Fans have reason to be excited here.
No doubt.
And that having that, literally the first play in 12 personnel was a touchdown to Dalton
and in the
Kincaid.
red zone. Yeah. And in the red zone, it was Kincaid right on the touchdown, or right at the goal line at least, with some movement from that wide receiver. It opened up the middle, and something we saw routinely in the red zone.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when you see a rookie come in, there's some hesitancy. You don't see them flash immediately, or it's a one-off thing. Dalton Kincaid stood out. I mean, he was absolutely as advertised coming out of Utah. The big thing about him was that they have a pro-ready offense, an offense that really shows and teaches its tight ends to be tight ends.
Right.
Not, some bubblegum offense, and that's important. And kind of like what you were saying before, Eric, and I really like this, is that the Bills' offense last year, after we lost Kumaro and after we lost, Jamison Crowder, there wasn't a lot of flexibility. You couldn't really, you had Diggs and Davis on the outside. You couldn't flex anybody to the outside. You had no other boundary options. Now, with Diggs, with Davis, you also have Justin Shorter with his size.
Yeah, Sherfield looked really good.
Your tight ends also, you can move them all over the place, and that opens up Deontay Hardy. That opens up Trent Sherfield in the slot, or James Cook if you want to go 12 personnel and then move him and flex him out to the slot. There's so many things that you can see a guy like Ken Dorsey deploy and actually get creative and, kind of go back. And what you were saying is go back to those Dable roots because,
Yeah.
Even though this is Dorsey's second year, he is learning some intricacies that he kind of got from his heir apparent.
Right. And we saw that in the red zone. You're talking about, that low red zone, 10 yards, 5 yards and in. And we saw a lot more 3-level passing concepts. So you saw, 2x2 sets, but that number one wide receiver was kind of motioning in, short motion, and he'd curl it up. The tight end be in line. He'd be running those corner routes. We saw Sternberger actually score on this type of play. And then they would send the running back, James Cook or Harris, to the front pylon. So you're stretching the defense horizontally. So you're trying to stretch them horizontally, but now you have the size with the tight ends, Kincaid and Knox and others, to again attack the back line and that 3 vertical stretch, attack the back line, the front line, and the intermediate. And so it feels like Dorsey and Allen, I know Allen had input on this, they kind of went back to some of those 3-level passing concepts, those spot concepts, easy triangle reads in the red zone when things are happening faster. And again, it goes back to his roots all the way back to Wyoming.
And talk about some of the bigger guys. One of the guys, he stands out for multiple reasons. Deontay Hardy is a little
Yeah.
I got a couple of really nice pictures in my thread, him standing next to some of the other guys, especially the offensive line. Like he's definitely a legit 5'6". Like
Yeah.
he really is 5'6". He's thick. He's not like super skinny. Like you could tell he's got some power to him. But he stood out multiple times. First snaps on the punts we saw from Sam Martin, the first 3, Deontay Hardy was back there. You picked out some of the things. Quick jet motion, had a jet sweep to him. Then another really cool play where it was like almost a read option with Josh. He put it in Cook's belly, pulled it back, and then instead of going out and him running with it, almost like flipped it forward like a pop pass to Hardy. And that was a play we hadn't really seen before, so it kind of a new wrinkle from Dorsey. And just seeing there was a concerted effort to get Kincaid and Hardy the ball with designs to them.
Yeah, especially over the middle, right?
Yeah,
like,
I love seeing that kind
and real quick on Hardy and Shakir, because I think that battle is also fun too, right?
Yeah, Shakir got
right.
first team reps.
Yeah, and what's cool is, again, I talked about using them on the boundary and whatnot. When you see them run those choice routes, those option routes, those leverage reads of that defender, like we loved Cole Beasley to do all those years, they come out of their breaks differently. Shakir he's not as bursty. He doesn't accelerate as much coming out of that break, so he's not as sudden, but he's smooth. And that's hard for a DB to judge. Now, Hardy is different. Again, you talked about his size, but he explodes out of his break. So that comparison, and those two guys, again, one play to another in a game as a DB, that's tough to judge and tough to gauge when you're reading that defender and that wide receiver.
Right. And the big thing about Hardy, I think, and we talked about this, Hardy looks the part in training camp, very much so. Like Isaiah McKenzie looked the part.
Sure.
Now it becomes, can they translate into the
Great
offense
point.
and be able to actually utilize him? Because I think personally, and if you look at what he did over in New Orleans, he's not that gadget guy. He's not just a guy who's going to jet sweep. You can literally move him all over. You can use him as an X, as a Y in the slot.
Actually played a surprising amount of outside snaps.
Exactly. Again, yeah.
Absolutely. So you can use them all over. And on top of that, we saw that punt return ability. So that's the nice thing is the guys that we have now, i.e. Trent Sherfield, the number 1 blocking tight end last year per PFF, are guys that have so much versatility. And that, Sean McDermott has talked about this for years. Guys that provide and, allow themselves not only to be available, but to be multiple and, have different options for them, become valuable assets to this team. And those are these type of guys.
Last couple things on offense here before we flip to defense. The offensive line was what it was expected.
Yeah.
You saw, Deion Dawkins, Connor McGovern was the first guy at left guard, every first team snap at left guard that I saw. Morris at center, Ryan Bates at right guard, Spencer Brown at right tackle, pretty consistently together. And then the next unit had, Brandon Shell and Questenberry out there, Osiris Torrance. I didn't see any rotation of anybody else, whether it was Torrance or Edwards in on the first team for offensive line. That seemed to be pretty consistent. Running backs Cook every initial rep with the first team offense. But the first guy in there was Damian Harris.
Right.
And Harris got some nice looks, a couple nice route running pieces in the red zone, not something that I think most fans think of initially for him. We also saw him on the wing on pass coverage, so being in a position like that was a good way to be able to see more usage and involvement. So being able to have him in there was a good sign. And I know you picked up on Latavius Murray because he's very noticeable.
Yeah, Latavius Murray is bigger than just a big guy. I mean, when you see him on the field, he stands out. It's like a Greg Rousseau, just guys that are just normally weight. Latavius Murray standing next to tight end, standing next to defensive ends. He looks like he could play almost any position on the football field, minus tackle. And the other thing that's crazy about him, and I think it's really wild with all three of them, James Cook, Damian Harris, and Latavius Murray, is they're all not only kind of just elusive, but they're fast. They've all got bursts to them, which is an impactful thing.
Right.
Because I mean, even Dawson Knox said Damian Harris may be pound for pound the fastest running back in the room. I mean, just his ability as being a quick running back is going to be big for them. Damian Harris is just a different animal, and having him and Latavius Murray to provide that oomph that Josh Allen can kind of lean on instead of having to, like he said himself, has to kind of adjust the way he plays the game. Now you have two guys that can, be utilized in that red zone appeal, but also that have speed as well. So it's a different backfield than we had in the past. You now have guys that can do multiple things, which is exciting.
Yeah, and obviously Stephon Diggs back to himself.
Yeah.
Looking really crisp. Josh going to him multiple times, and even though we talked about Trey and we'll talk about the defense here in a moment, Diggs was still looking like himself, which was nice to see.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
How about on defense? Well, obviously we talked earlier. We spent the majority of our time focused on offense. I was probably 80% on offense versus defense. So, what were some that stood out to you on the defensive side?
Usually, especially in the first couple days of camp, usually the defense is ahead of the offense, right? I thought the offense took it to the defense, especially when we talked that red zone in those crucial situations. I thought the defense overall, as expected, were a little more aggressive. In those crucial situations, red zone, third downs, fourth downs, in the 2-minute drill, you saw Sean McDermott call it a little more aggressively, a lot more press man, a lot more physicality throughout the route. And even their zone concepts, it's not just spot dropping or landmark dropping, where you're just getting to a spot and then seeing who comes to your zone. They were pushing out to the targets and then almost, turning from a zone defense or zone coverage into man-like coverage. So I thought it was very aggressive on that side of the ball. We did see some cool wrinkles as well. There was one play where Poyer and Hyde were deep safeties, and Poyer came down near the line of scrimmage. They were double mugging the linebackers right in the A gaps, showing pressure. And then as the ball was snapped, they bring Poyer and screamed him right to the post, from the line of scrimmage areas. Very, Wink Martindale-like, very Ravens-like, stuff they used to do in Baltimore. And so seeing that aggressiveness and some of those cool new wrinkles, Taylor Rapp, when he was in there at safety, playing, in the slot as a nickel, but then also dropping out post-snap into the flats. So there's some cool stuff that we're seeing from McDermott, and I'm excited for day 2 when it comes to those wrinkles.
How about you, Thomas?
For defense, like I said, Tre'Davious White is showing himself as being the guy that we thought potentially he could come back to, and I think we're going to be really excited to see the steps that he can make to get back to the all-pro status. But the one guy that really kind of stuck out is Greg Rousseau. Greg Rousseau, and I always kind of go back to that analogy of like a deer when it's first born, trying to figure out how to walk and use its body. Greg Rousseau coming into the league, as a converted safety wide receiver in Miami, then a defensive end, is learning how to be a defensive end, but on top of it, learning how to use that body. And as he has filled out, and you can see from year 1 to now, the progression in his frame, in his body, his mass, everything, you're going to see a guy that's going to be more impactful. And on top of it, if you watch the Embedded series, he reached out to Micah Parsons and asked him about how he can utilize different moves and, swimming to the inside and kind of getting more versatility into his package. And I think a guy like Greg Rousseau now having a frame that is going to benefit him and not something that's going to hinder him, like I think we've seen with, Epinesa sometimes.
Right.
I think Groot is going to really potentially be something that we haven't seen in a long time, a defensive end that can truly impact the game.
I'm excited to see where that goes. Obviously, defensive line's tough to be able to get much from. So seeing Groot filling out his frame, and I like that he did it, naturally, not like forcing on bad weight. Sometimes you see guys kind of push that too early and it's not really helpful. Seeing him just, really thick. Obviously, number 56 being out there, my brain went to Mike Love a couple times. I was like, oh, no, that's Leonard Floyd. We have Leonard Floyd now.
Yeah.
This is fun. Just seeing very lanky.
Yeah.
Like seeing the length and how he's able to still burst right off the line. Really, really impressive there. Poona Ford's belly looked fantastic. Really, really good. Majestic almost. It was really nice to see. You touched on Taylor Rapp. I like seeing the versatility. We saw him as the next safety coming in, in the second team, but also getting the second team nickel reps when there were 2 safeties in the game. So I like seeing that. That was a question in years past where was it Cam Lewis? Was it Saran Neal? Was it needing Christian Benford to slide over or trying to force somebody else into that role whenever Taron Johnson needed a break or was injured, hopefully not. Being in that kind of position, seeing Taylor Rapp play those reps is going to be interesting. And whether they go to that look, whether we see dime where it's Taron and Taylor Rapp on each side of Milano, or whether he's was in there in place of Taron Johnson or whether he was in there as a safety in some other looks. I like seeing the versatility of how they moved him around. From a rep standpoint, we saw very as expected, like we
Right.
saw on offense. You saw the guys in there getting the expected reps. Same on defense. Dane Jackson was his first corner initially. Terrell Dodson was the 1st linebacker initially. Everybody else was pretty much as expected. Both Micah and Poyer were back there. We saw Trey back. Taryn was in. Defensive line was as expected. Daquan and Ed Oliver in a defensive tackle. Groot and Floyd out there as defensive end. So most of that was pretty much as expected. Any other thoughts on defense before we go to tomorrow?
No, like you said, we kind of zoomed in on the offense today, and what we need to pay attention to from tomorrow at the very least is again McDermott and the coaching staff, how they're handling those responsibilities, and especially when they go to 2-minute drill, like who's the first person talking to McDermott, and kind of helping him and directing him in those crucial situations. So watching that, and again, when it comes to the linebackers and the corner positions, Mike linebacker and cornerback too. Who's starting tomorrow? Because that is very important. Yes, it was Dane Jackson and Dodson today, but what is it? What happens tomorrow, and what does that mean?
And that will give us an indication of is that hey, these guys have the first crack at it and they're the leader in the clubhouse until somebody beats them, or is tomorrow a rotation and we're like, oh, well, they got first crack at it, but it's 50-50.
It's a true competition.
It's
Correct.
A rotation. So that's going to be a tell for me to see who gets those reps tomorrow, where those things go. Like I said, I spent most of my time watching whether it was individual drills, one-on-ones, red zone. I was focused on the offense today. Tomorrow I'm really going to be looking at defense, trying to pay attention most closely there. Anything else that's in your focus for tomorrow, Thomas?
Just seeing what the evolution of Kyer Elam and Christian Benford is, because we know Dane Cook. He's the guy that is the tried and true. He's the old faithful.
Yeah, Dane Jackson. Yeah,
Dane Jackson,
yes, Dane Cook.
Dane Jackson being a guy that McDermott trusts implicitly. And so seeing that Kyer and Christian can step up and really, I hate to say nut up or shut up, but be the guy that can fill that role. Kyer was a first round pick. You need to step up and show that you're worth that first round pick, and having that ability to having 3 very competent CB2s. The other thing is Sean McDermott really becoming the defensive coordinator, back to his roots, seeing how that trend, kind of that trend goes and where he progresses and how he kind of develops as a defensive coordinator and head coach. We know that's been a big talking point, with Andy Reid doing the offense. Can he juggle all those things? Can he utilize Al Holcomb? Can he use his, position coaches like Eric Washington to help him along the way? And you saw, during the 2-minute drill, he put that headset back on.
Right.
Had to take off his shade hat.
Big thing.
And then it's serious.
Yes.
Serious. So for him, seeing those kind of evolutions of his coaching and maybe potentially, really kind of becoming, his baby, and earmarking that part of his coaching tree. So I'm excited to see where that goes, but I think we have a lot to look forward to, and it should be an exciting week.
Awesome. Anything else before we wrap up, guys?
No, definitely not, man. It's fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. We saw a couple of you guys out there today. If you stop by here at training camp, come and say hi. It was awesome to be able to connect with people. We're going to be here bringing you content for the first handful of days here at training camp. But make sure you're checking it out. Look for Eric J. Turner and Cover One on Twitter. I'm at Greg Thompson, at Thomas DeLaus. Make sure you're checking out all the things that we're sharing as we're going through, taking pictures, giving you an idea of what we're seeing out there in practice, and we'll bring you more recaps as we go. But thank you on behalf of Eric Turner and Thomas. I am Greg Thompson. You've been listening to Cover One, and we are out.